you could say it's another lost season for the Clippers. It's another season of failure. It's another season of coming up short. And it's not all the Clippers' fault because, as I said, they've had injuries throughout this season. And really, they've been injury riddled throughout the last few seasons since the operation started with Kawhi Leonard and PG. It's always been a major injury to a key player, in their, that's trying to contribute to help win a championship, whether it was, Kawhi Leonard, whether it was Paul George, Serge Ibaka when they had him, and, the likes of other players on the team as well. So, the Clippers never really been fully healthy as a team, not really one specific, season so far since they've been together. But, only thing you can hope for is maybe next year, because honestly, the way they're built and the way their team is, they got a really good roster, and they're filled with a bunch of talent and a lot of depth on scoring and defense, both ends of the floor. And honestly, I would say they're the most talented team in regards to being well-rounded as far as having all the pieces they need to help them get over the hump. The only problem with the Clippers is most people would say the curse on the Clippers is real. So it's like the curse on them now is their health more than anything. It's not about them not having the talent. It's not about them not being good enough like as previous teams in, 10, 20 years ago, not being good enough to win. Now they are good enough to win. They just can't stay healthy enough to win. And that's just a huge downside, to their journey in regards to trying to win a championship. But that's just the reality of it. Now going into next season, as I said, they might be the most scariest team that any team wants to face. But at the same time, you got to just be wary with the Clippers at this point, because you have to think like, man, you just hope health doesn't get in the way, because these last 3 seasons, that's exactly what it was. The first season, Kawhi Leonard came out, in a blaze, coming fresh off his championship with the Toronto Raptors, coming into LA, being the face of the NBA, at least for a while, with his commercials and the Kawhi Town and everything. And Paul George was actually injured that year. I think he had shoulder surgery or something like that that year, going into the bubble where they fell on their face. And then the next season, they come back and, Kawhi Leonard, gets hurt, with the ACL. And they come up short there because they due to injury. And then this season, Kawhi Leonard plays none this season, nursing the ACL injury. Paul George has an elbow injury, plays some of the season, then comes back and then goes out with COVID in the biggest game of the Clippers season in the play-in tournament against the Pelicans, which they lose. And now the season's over. So, I mean, it's just a lost season for the Clippers, another lost season, and as I said before, these opportunities, they start to wane after a while. That window for the championship, it closes more and more each year you don't win it. And, nothing's a guarantee, because as I said before, next year, how do you know that another team won't come back with a super team or a big 3 or something like that nobody can beat or nobody can even stand toe-to-toe to, because nobody has enough talent on their team to beat a team like that? So, I mean, it's no guarantee that you're going to win the championship year after year after year or the next year, because teams come back better the year after, just like the Phoenix Suns did. The Phoenix Suns last year, and, they made it to the NBA Finals, and a lot of people thought it was a fluke. So they come back this year with the best record in the NBA, not even close, letting everybody know, sending the NBA world a message like last year wasn't a fluke. We're really that good. So it's like, that's my point. Teams come back better year after year after year. So you can't really depend on what will happen in the future, or will be this, will be that. Yeah, you could say those things, but a lot goes into that. Yeah, the Clippers will be a scary team next year, but who else might be scary next year? Who else might make a trade in the offseason and become a contending type team, just like the Clippers will be? You see what I'm saying? And then on top of that, over the last three seasons, you got to always keep in the back of your mind, hoping that the Clippers stay healthy, because that's their Achilles heel. They can't stay healthy as a unit and a team team to go out there and form this thing and put it together and make a run, so you got to look at that as well. So, I mean, you just got to hope that the Clippers stay healthy and hope that the Clippers can, maintain that, because that's like I said, that's their Achilles heel, and that's what's held them back these last 3 seasons that they've tried to go out there and win a championship, for the city of LA, in which they definitely have the pieces to do it. I thought, they had a really good team, especially looking at this season with all the games that the Clippers came back, and they were down a lot of games, down a lot of adversity, and they found ways to come through. They were definitely the most resilient team in the NBA. Ty Lue definitely, should have got some mentions or some votes, I should say, for the coach of the year, because he definitely, did a lot of good things with this team with a lot less talent than most other teams in the NBA, but they still found a way to be competitive, and they still found a way to be resilient and fight every game and have that next man up mentality. It just didn't work. It just flamed out at some point. And as I said before, those things are going to happen, because when you don't have your best players on the floor, your home run hitters, sometimes that's just what it comes down to. You got to have your home run hitters, because those are the ones who could bring you home. Those are the ones who can deliver when time is needed. And, those are the ones who you need in big situations and big moments where, you got to have somebody to put the ball in their hands and they can deliver and take us home. And that's what the Clippers were missing, because if you ask me, even if the Clippers, of course, didn't have Paul George, if he didn't come back, they had Kawhi Leonard, they would have got past the play-in tournament, or, whatever the case may be, or if they had both of them, they definitely would have got past the play-in tournament. So, it's a lot of ifs and a lot of probabilities, with the Clippers, and, this next season is going to have to tell it all, because, I'd say after this next season going into the following, I think, I'm not sure, but I think Kawhi or PG or somebody like that can opt out the contract, or, it's whatever the case may be, the Clippers might look a lot different after this following season, It's just a tough situation for the Clippers, because they're right there. They have all the pieces they need, but it's like they're all not available when needed, and it's very, very frustrating with this team, because this team is definitely a championship quality team, but it's always something that clips them. It's always something that makes them come up short. And these last couple years, I mean, it's always been, in these last couple seasons, it's been injury riddled seasons, for the Clippers. They just can't find a way to keep everybody on the floor and everybody healthy enough to go out there and do what they need to do. And like I said, you can't help injuries, so nor am I ever saying that, it's their fault, because injuries just can't be helped. I mean, no player wants to get injured. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Everybody wants to be healthy, playing out there and contributing and doing what they love to do. But at the same time, it's reality and it's sports, and this is how it goes, one play, one injury, a lot of things, can dictate or determine the outcome sometime. And as I said, the Clippers are the most fighting team that I've ever seen in my life in regards to, watching basketball, because what they were able to do, at least to make the play-in tournament, was impressive by not having their 2 superstars all season. And they found a way, to come through. And it wasn't good enough in the end. In the end, it just wasn't good enough. They couldn't find a way to, sustain that and make it into the playoffs. And now they're sitting at home wondering, what could have been. Like I said, Paul George getting COVID at the last minute seemed like just the most craziest thing I think I've heard. I mean, as I said, in yesterday's video, I thought the COVID was, simmered down a lot better, than it was, earlier in the season. Because earlier in the season, you would hear, like, from day to day, at least 5-10 players, at the bottom of the screen. If you looked at ESPN, this player struck with COVID, this player's had COVID, this player's out with COVID issues, this player's out COVID related, stuff like that. It was really bad in the beginning of the season, and it kind of simmered down at the end. So it was really shocking to hear just all of a sudden the night of the game, of the biggest game of the Clippers season, this season, Paul George is not playing because of COVID. Now, I'm not sure how that, transpired or anything like that, but hopefully, hopefully he wasn't, out doing nothing, crazy or anything like that, or hanging out with the wrong crowd or whatever the case may be. Who knows? But it's over and done with now. But I don't really know how that happened. That was just a shock to everybody. I don't know. It just came completely out of left field, and nobody really saw that coming, of course. And, even though the Clippers still had a chance to win that game against the Pelicans, they didn't. And you got to give the Pelicans credit because they came out with a victory. But like I said, it's just another lost season for the Clippers. What could have been. And, these can't keep happening, because Steve Ballmer's putting out a lot of money for this team to develop and this team to have everything they need to win. But they got to try to find a way to stay healthy enough to do so. And, right now, the Clippers are definitely probably thinking that. And, like I said, this team could look different after next season. They really could. After next season, going into the off season of the, following season, after that, they could look a lot different. Contracts, players, can make moves, things like that. So, honestly, this next season specifically, they got to win the championship. They don't have any other choice. It's no other choice at all. Because that'll be 4 seasons where you had an opportunity to make the finals at least, and you didn't, whether due to injury or whatever the case may be. It doesn't really matter. You got to find a way. And that's just, what it comes down to. Because think about it. When you look at the Clippers, how deep they are, even with Paul George or with Kawhi Leonard without Paul George, they still got a good enough team, I think, to at least make it to a finals. Or they did, especially. And, I'm not saying that they still can't make it, because of course they can make it now because they got a huge, wide roster full of, offensive talent and things like that. I do think they miss players, like Patrick Beverley and people like that. Because if you look at like last night's game against the Pelicans, they definitely could have used a player like Patrick Beverley, because I definitely think, he would have went out there and, gave Brandon Ingram, a little bit of hell and got into his head and played some, crazy defense on to throw him off his game some, which could have helped the Clippers win that game. And, keep applying pressure on a team like that and get in their psyche and allow the Clippers to have the advantage. So, having somebody like Patrick Beverley, in last night's, or should I say the other night's game, against the Pelicans would have been, ideal, but it's not. And it's just a far-fetched conclusion, really, because they don't. And, as I said before, the little things sometimes come back to haunt you, and not having somebody like Patrick Beverley, in a game like, the other night against the Pelicans when Paul George goes out due to COVID, I think they still would have won that game if they had somebody like him, even without Kawhi and PG on the floor. I still think they would have won that game because somebody like that brings the energy, the defense, and, the wisdom of knowing how to, get into the other team's head in their psyche and, throw them off their game. But, the Clippers didn't have him. So, he's on another team now and his team advanced and the Clippers didn't. And that's the way the dice fall. And, not having Luke Kennard, shout out to him, was a huge loss too, because he was one of their biggest main pieces this year in regards to their resiliency and how they played and how they came back a lot of games and how they sustained through the season. He was a big part of that. It wasn't just Reggie Jackson. Luke Kennard was a big part of that too, and definitely one of the best 3-point shooters in the league. Definitely could have helped them more on offense. I believe that could have helped them win the other night as well against the Pelicans. So, it's always a piece missing here and there where the Clippers could have done it, but, in reality, they didn't. And that's just the way it is. And they got to go into next season just hoping that everybody stays healthy enough to make that run and try to, make it happen. Because as I said, next year is it. Because after that, if everybody comes back through this off season next year, you're going to see some changes on the Clippers in that next off season. You're going to see some changes, whether contracts, or some players are able to walk, some players, can have the option to stay or whatever, or they might just, make some, trade acquisitions, whatever the case may be. But you're definitely going to see some changes if they don't win it next year. So the pressure's on the Clippers even more next season, because everybody's going to look at them as the most scary team. Everybody's going to look at them as the team that should come out the West. And, when when analysts and people start looking at you like that, you got to live up to that hype. You have to. You just got to do it, because if the Clippers don't win it next year, then the notion will be, well, they lost in the bubble, fell on their face in the bubble when everybody expected them to go out there and make it to the NBA Finals and win it that year because of the team they had and how well put together they were with Kawhi and PG and the rest of the guys. And they, lost a 3-1 lead. Then they had, the most scariest team in the NBA with Kawhi, PG, Norman Powell, Robert Covington, and all these great defensive players going into next season, and they found a way to come short then. So, I mean, it would make the Clippers look really bad if they don't find a way to at least make it to the finals next year. I mean, they have to at least find a way to make it there. I mean, that's just no other way. I mean, you got to at least make it to a finals. I mean, that's just pretty much what it comes down to, So, right now, things are not looking good. But, I mean, like I said, it's always another season, following. So, I mean, there's always an opportunity going forward. But it gets harder and harder each season that you don't win it, and each season that you know that you have a good enough team to win it. And it was just an injury or two here or there that stopped you from getting there. It is really demoralizing for a team mentally. And, but hey, they got Ty Lue. They got a good motivator. They got a good coach who can, push them in the right direction, but they just got to try to find a way to stay healthy enough to do so. And hopefully next season to turn out, or, it'll give them the outcome that they're looking for, which is, ultimately holding up a championship in LA. But hey, that's my take on everything. Leave any comments in the comment section. As always, like, subscribe, and hey, Khaliis out.